Hello, and thanks for joining us on Encore. Coming up on today's show. We take a dip with that most famous of underwater explorers, Jacques Cousteau. The former French naval commander is the subject of a new biopic, The Odyssey, which recounts the life and work of the filmmaker and environmental activist. Revisiting an ecological disaster in spectacular style, Deepwater Horizon tells the story of the fatal oil spill that gushed into the Gulf of Mexico 6 years ago. And a new exhibition tackles questions of race, segregation and creation in the US. The Color Line celebrates African American art and culture while bearing witness to its painful history. He's known for his iconic red bobble hat and his exploits on the ocean floor. Jacques Cousteau is the subject of a new film here in France, The Odyssey. The biopic of the undersea explorer shines a light on the man who made more than 100 films about marine life. France 24 went to meet the movie stars and its director.
Quand on est sous l'eau, on est dans l'apesanteur la plus totale. En dessous, eh bien, un bleu de plus en plus profond. Un monde entier à découvrir.
Former French naval commander and iconic red woolen hat wearer Jacques Cousteau is celebrated in Odyssey, a biography of the famous French undersea explorer. Cousteau dedicated his life to documenting the undersea world, making a total of 120 underwater films.
Cousteau was always looking for the image, how to make cameras that go underwater, how to film the underwater world. He was obsessed by the aesthetics of diving.
À 50 mètres de la surface, des hommes tournent un film.
Cousteau's work was first introduced to the French public in the 1950s in the Oscar-winning film The World of Silence. They also became familiar with his skinny frame. The half Jules Verne character, half merman, appeared as a character in most of his films. Among his technological breakthroughs was the development of a scuba apparatus he invented with two friends.
Allô, plage arrière, envoyez!
Cousteau gave us 2/3 of our planet. That's his legacy. Before Cousteau, the sea was 360 million square kilometers of a mirror with nothing beneath.
For decades, the televised adventures of Cousteau and his faithful boat Calypso captured the imaginations of generation after generation. While filming Odyssey, the filmmakers wanted to stay as close to this atmosphere of wonderful discovery as possible. The actors sank below the surface to dive with sharks, while a full-blown reconstruction of Cousteau's boat, the Calypso, was built in South Africa. The crew circled the globe in order to retrace Cousteau's footsteps. As part of this quest for truth, they were also unafraid to confront the oceanographer's more controversial aspects. At the start of his career, Cousteau was no ecologist.
Coming out at the end of the Second World War, they killed as many fish as possible. He was crazy about fishing. During the filming of The World of Silence, he massacred many sharks. How did this man then gain a conscience and realize that the world's last true wilderness was being destroyed? I find that evolution very interesting.
He even received funding from oil companies to make his films. The accusation that he would take any opportunity, no matter how destructive, to create his spectacles was first brought to him by his son, Philippe.
Prêt à faire n'importe quoi pour du fric, en fait.
De quoi tu parles?
Tu vas pouvoir raconter une belle histoire, bien bidon, bien mégalo comme thème, hein. Le commandant Cousteau et son équipage se lient d'amitié avec des animaux sauvages, mais c'est super, c'est génial, bravo. C'est les clavis.
Those close to him say that Cousteau's determination could sometimes make him a hard man to deal with.
I think that it's interesting for the audience to see that, first of all, that he had to struggle a lot, that he had to fight to get money all his life, and that made him sometimes hard and rather obsessive. And interesting also to realize that he was a charismatic man, charismatic father, but also a hard father, and put his children to the test of his judgment and sometimes his wrath.
However, in the end, Cousteau took up the fight to save the oceans. He often raised awareness of the threat of ecological destruction in his latter broadcasts. The film also shows that he was instrumental in protecting the Antarctic from exploitation, a legacy that remains today, almost 20 years on from his death.
It was the biggest industrial and environmental catastrophe to hit the United States. The 2010 explosion of a BP-operated offshore drilling rig in the Gulf of Mexico left 11 dead, and it caused the largest marine oil spill in history. A new film tells its story. With all the ingredients of a nail-biting thriller, Deepwater Horizon also takes a critical look at the corporate scramble for ever larger profit margins.
It's not your average office. 30,000 tons of iron and concrete in the middle of the sea.
Who are you? Mike Williams, Chief ET.
Mark and his colleagues work at Deepwater Horizon, the biggest oil drilling rig ever built and run by BP. But over budget and behind schedule, the multi-billion-dollar corporation is in a hurry.
We a big company with millions of moving parts.
It's a race to the bottom. Ever deeper drilling to extract ever more petrol.
That ain't good. Hey, Jason, are you seeing this?
At no point is the safety protocol respected, and the gigantic blaze won't be tamed for 48 hours.
That's the kind of story that I like. These men that were killed and their families, the men that were hurt, the men that tried, and women who tried to stop this from happening. I found that to be very emotional and quite intense.
A story that's even more intense when you know that it's true. On the 20th of April 2010, a cataclysmic explosion rocked the Gulf of Mexico, leading to the biggest accidental marine oil spill ever seen. That day, 11 people lost their lives. And over the next 3 months, 50,000 barrels of petrol poured into the sea every day.
You're a good man, Mike.
The film focuses on the men and women confronted with this disaster.
Mike.
As an actor or as a cinematographer or anybody else in any job title, it really becomes about making sure that you make these families proud and you do these guys justice.
The film doesn't hesitate in pointing the finger firmly at BP for the catastrophe. The company has paid billions in fines and damages, but most of all, its mistake costed its public image, an image it is still trying to rebuild.
An invisible line that segregated, separated, and kept certain pieces of artwork out of the mainstream in the United States. The Colour Line is the name of a new exhibition at Paris's Quai Branly Museum, which looks back at the history of African-American art and culture, bringing it to a new audience here in France. The end of the Civil War in 1865 may have officially brought an end to slavery in the US, but racial discrimination continued to have a lasting impact on American society. Emerald Maxwell takes a look.
Slavery, segregation, racism, lynching. The history and struggle of African Americans over nearly a century and a half, seen through the eyes and works of the artists who were subjected to it. From painting to photography to music, it's the first time many have been exhibited in France. Artists who, through their art, fought for their rights and their freedom, each in their own way.
So some of the paintings here are direct Black Panther newspaper covers or crisis covers directly in service of the struggle. And others are much more subtle, where the message is, don't forget that this is a group of people who are very, very talented and who have an aesthetic message for the world.
A bleeding star-spangled banner, the symbolic raised fist of black activism, Malcolm X to Billie Holiday. All portray the artistic struggle to break the colour line, the invisible but all too real line of racial demarcation. These are depictions of a history filled with hope and despair, of civil disobedience, peaceful protests, or violent riots.
1865 saw the end of slavery, so everyone thought, that's it, everything's going to be fine now. But in 1870, we see the beginning of the segregation laws, which brought disillusionment. Then, during World War II, there were 900,000 black soldiers. So you think things are going to get better. In fact, it takes another 20 years of struggle, of marching, of protest to get to 1964, when the segregation laws are finally abolished.
But to this day, the colour line is far from broken. A topical exhibition of a still burning issue.
We're finishing with a selection of artwork united by its provenance. The title of the show is The Other Continent. That means all of the painting, sculpture, video and photography on show at Le Havre's Natural History Museum comes from Africa, and all of the artists involved are women. Remember, you can get more arts and culture on our website, and you can also follow Encore on our social media channels. There's more news coming up on France 24 after this.